All right, we're going to get this special meeting and workshop called to order. Let the record show we don't have a quorum, so there's going to be no official action taken. This is just a workshop to share some ideas and introduce some experts in the field of waterfront development. So we'll still, I guess, ask for a motion to, do we need a motion? Okay, so we don't need a motion to approve any minutes since we don't have a quorum. Mary, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, Ken, as we go through, again, needs to be interactive and don't be bashful. I know a lot of folks are not bashful. I'd like to welcome my wife to the room right here, too. But again, this is to present, I guess, some concepts and you know, for our purpose is that we know we've got a waterfront that has tremendous opportunity. And it takes, you know, more than a village, a bunch of ideas in order to say to hammer out a path that we could go down. And so as we go through this, before I introduce our special guest, you know, Kenny, as people would ask questions, and we'll try to identify them if you have a view or I have a view. So that would be the plan. So we want to thank our guests, Anne Breen and Dick Rigby. And this is their first visit to Biloxi. And they've been doing tremendous things, have tremendous ideas, and have seen and been part of a tremendous amount of waterfront, edge of the water development. I think that's the key. So as we go through this road, it has many pedals, and we're going to try over the next days, today, rest of the afternoon, and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll identify things, the challenges, and a way to make this the very, very best it can be. So from the Waterfront Center, I'd like to introduce Anne Breen and Dick Rigby. And we're going to turn the lights down and have popcorn ready. So press it. Press it. You got to press that button right here.
You got to press the button on the base.
Right here. There you go.
Green.
Very good.
Before we start, I wanted to give the mayor and the city council some books that we've written. Bear in mind, we are an educational organization. We are an educational, drive me crazy, educational organization, and I wanted to present you with some books of ours. Caution Market Management, an issue that we really are keen on. So we're working on it for one possible and open it up. We also present fishing tours, what cities can do. We had so much fun doing this book, going around the country and watching people create tremendous community at their fishing piers. Then we're giving you the first 20 years of our awards program. We've been running an awards program for 31 years, and now 400 projects have been recognized. Visit our website. There's an interactive database. You can get all kinds of information. The website is www.waterfrontcenter.org. And we'll give you our first book, which is Waterfronts, Cities Reclaim Their Edge. We wrote this in the 80s, and it's the first 5 years of our award winners. So here's for your library and for all of you to consult.
Thank you.
Now, I think the air conditioning has gotten to my head in some of these places. So without further ado, I want to read this quote that the noted architectural critic said during our first annual international conference in 1983. And the sentiment still lasts for us. Our bodies and spirits need the fresh breezes that blow from the water. We need the sense of community, the opportunities for festivity, for artistic expression, recreation, and commercial bustle that urban waterfronts offer. We need what is called the public happiness. And I would add that since that time, that's over 33 years ago, he would probably include issues of environmental concerns and sustainability, to name a few. But I think that quote is still wonderful. I'm going to make a challenge here for all of you of a certain descent. Do you know where this wonderful piece of public art that celebrates the seafood industry is? Split, Croatia. I found out from Gerald that there were a few Croatian people here in Biloxi, so we were there about 2 or 3 years ago. We fell in love with it, and this piece, I'm a big person on public art and involving the craftspeople and the artists in your community to create more beauty on your waterfront. So there it is. There's the waterfront of Split. It's absolutely beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's terrific, historic, and just wonderful. Now, this is a historic photograph that I found on the waterfront. This is something that's a great thing for you to do to, keep your history alive. Here's a woman sitting on the waterfront looking out over the harbor. Here's this incredible stretch of cafes, all outdoor cafes, very formal boulevard, and of course all the historic buildings behind. And the cafes, when they were hopping, they were hopping. This is another portion of that same part of the waterfront, only this is a little funkier. And I always like to think people should know it's not only that beautiful, formal cafe scene, but with the funkiness and where you can get out there, you don't necessarily have to have your fancy coffee and drinks and stuff. And then here, notice the benches, and I'm going to say throughout this presentation, look at the design detail. You are going to, at some point, have to pick things. And you want to pick things that you of Biloxi want, not what some designer comes in here and says, oh, that's good for you. No. Anyway, funk is fun. And Gerald took us down to your beach area, and we really loved that with all that big shark. And that was fun. This is you wandering around the corner, but the beautiful trees and the wide walkways and the boats. It's really beautiful. Keep going around the waterfront until you come to a brand new park that they were building while we were there. So it's very modern. It's actually a walk of fame for the Olympians of Croatia. But notice the different kind of street furniture there. This was under construction, so they had plaques for all of these Olympians marching along that walkway. And here, this is under construction, but I thought this was an interesting, it looks like it's going to be a snack bar or a bar with a see-through aspect so you can see the water. And there are the benches, the chaise lounge, the lighting is unusual. It's going to, I imagine now it's all grown up in the vegetation. I bet it's beautiful. And I stuck this in because, of course, you are a seafood culture. This was behind the scenes. This is not on the waterfront, but seafood markets, all kinds of markets like this that maybe aren't so gorgeous, but they do their job, and people love them. I'm now in Westminster. I'm emphasizing a lot of edge here and places where you can do things with no lot of land. You have a ton of land, but along the edge, you sometimes you don't want to take up property. So this is Westminster, British Columbia. Notice the constraints on that site. Now, today, you see the parks there and all that green sward. That's what's today. And I'm going to show you several before and afters, and they're always inspirational, I think. So this is a linear park, and these are some of the design detailing. Look at the seats, the boulders that have been put in, the flowers, the lighting. They refer back to their history a lot. So here's a memory band that's been embedded into the paving. These wonderful hammocks, a children's play area. Hammocks are becoming big on waterfronts these days. And this is a sort of all-purpose community structure where they can have classes, similar to the one you have here. They can have theatrical events or dances or yoga or whatever. Then these benches that flip back and forth, and notice the plantings are, I think, very beautiful. And also notice that restroom behind there in that red, and how attractive that is and tucked in there. I have a thing, I could do a show on restrooms. Bar and Discovery, always wonderful, and I'm going to get into that more, but this is also, again, very beautiful. This, I think, is neat. The historic photograph made into seat steps. So the heritage, instead of just being wood behind there, those are weatherproof photographs that, celebrate the history of the town. Now I go another part of the world, in Gloucester, Massachusetts, a famous seafood industry town. And it's still growing a good bit, and they built this Gloucester Harbor Walk, and the kiosks they're all dotted around the walkway. It's interactive with your cell phone. You can take pictures and send it back to your folks. You can listen to poetry by local authors. You can listen to music. It's just incredible. It's a really remarkable thing. Now here's the walkway, very pretty. And there's my friend against that fun thing. And then there's the lobster pots. But this walkway is so simple and so beautiful. But somebody might want it a little more complicated, but I think it's eloquent in simplicity. There's the boats, and then there are a lot of interpretive plaques, and you can see where you can put your phone up and get an interpretation. And again, more interpretation or a little tour. But we were so impressed with the simplicity of this thing, and then into the seafood stuff. This is Newport Island. I just discovered this project this year, and I was looking at this huge shed. It's devoted to boat building and boat repair, and of course this gorgeous ship, and all the plaques with the names of the ships. And here, this is they call it the dock walk, and there's on the left side and all sorts of things related to the businesses. Then on the right, wonderful tents and sitting and cafes, and there's a wonderful little cafe on the end where you can go order your food and then bring it out here and sit and watch the Newport Harbor, which is pretty darn exciting. What I love about this little slide is that it's a macadam walkway, and by just a coat of white paint, they've made it more interesting than walking on a blacktop. It's little things like that doesn't take a lot of money. That's not marble, that's not granite, that's just white paint. And here they're very close to a major marine industry. Oops, sorry. And that's the fun seating for the people. I think these new couches and the cushions and everything, they're taking off all over the country or the world. And you can see people are just hanging out, having a good time, eating their lobster rolls. And next door is a real working fishing area. And they have all the guys are hanging out there. It's a co-op for the lobstermen. And then they're selling, of course, lobster rolls. This is in Whangarei, New Zealand. And again, celebrating a bit of the industrial working waterfront style with those sheds behind and then the beautiful plantings in front, which it's a great looking thing, and it combines green space, working waterfront, and they have a lot of public art, as you can see from that steel sculpture. And that's their harbor walk, their art walk, as they call it. And you go somewhere and you see maps and you get a brochure to walk the whole waterfront. It's called Art Walk. And those are a couple pieces of the artwork there, which are reminiscent of the industries that they had at one time. Now this is in Toronto, and there's a working sugar refinery. And so there it is, and it's still working there, and it's very bold and robust. And so they took, I wanted to show you a minute. This little tiny piece is now called Sugar Beach. And so they just complete transformation of that into this wonderful, whimsical place with the pink umbrellas and the white deck chairs. And here it is at night. And it's got a water feature as well. So it's not a big area, but it's a lot of fun. And apparently the architect loves pink. This is Portland, Oregon, and this is one of the first projects on the Portland riverfront. It's called River Place, and it combines housing, retail, boutique hotel, public walkway, a boutique restaurant, a floating marina, and those floating docks in the front, they're fully publicly accessible. And I really like this project. It's old, but it was a wonderful thing to happen on what's happening in Portland. You could go on for days about what's going on in Portland. There is another view of it, again with the ramp.
Okay, watch the mayor. Like that?
Yeah, I'm not used to this. I'm used to standing up, and it's a whole different body thing. But that gives you an idea of the hotel, and then again, getting down to the water and the big green spaces where they have a lot of festivals next to it. This is also in Portland, a newer housing project. You can see the green space in the front, apartments, condos, and then the greenery going down to the water. They also have a nice walkway so boats can get down into the river. They're very big on access in Portland. This is a town, this is Owensboro, Kentucky. Now, this is, not many people get to Owensboro, Kentucky. And we were involved in a workshop there, did a lot of community work with them. And here's a sort of, okay, it's got a sidewalk. They did a lot of community work, including working with kids to get them to articulate what they wanted. And so, boom, look at that. A number of years later, you have no curb and gutter. The street can be shut off for festivals. It's got a huge children's play area. It's got all kinds of, places to picnic, and it's amazing transformation. It just shows you what can happen. This is Cleveland, not Cleveland, sorry, Milwaukee. And this, again, the edge. Those buildings are right smack up against the river. So they built these walkways. They're on pile, in some cases floating. And you can see it very simple. And then the use of the blue lights, I think, is lovely, very marine. And there you can see it in daylight. The seating, the little ramp to get on the boat, the cafes. But again, the simplicity. And here's a little boathouse, and maybe, as we were talking yesterday with some of the people, we will eventually get lots more, all different kinds of boating on your waterfront, and you'll need some boathouses. So there you go. But also, the same waterfront, again, tucked into a very tiny space, are these yellow cabs, and I think as you're sitting there at night, they light up, and it's just kind of a fun little public art intervention. This is Thunder Bay in Canada, and that's a huge community center on the waterfront there. And notice the steps down to get you closer to the water. I love the Adirondack chairs with the ones for the little kids, and the kind of coffee table there for your mug. And then they had a fountain in the summer and ice skating rink in the winter. That's not a problem for you. But anyways, I think it's a very beautiful thing. And then they did a lot of things like these sort of follies that go out into the water as part of the walkway. And at night they light up, and they have these tiny little piers that go out so people can get over the water. People love to get over the water. And then more sculptures, and then this sort of movie thing that goes on in those little follies. And then finally, they are very big on Native Americans, and that's a sort of story circle thing with using the basket weaving that the indigenous people are famous for. And notice instead of seats, they've got logs. It's very informal, very beautiful. This is Detroit. Now, Detroit took over 40. I don't want to talk too long, so many stories. But Detroit started over 40 years ago with one woman in the recreation department, and it worked. She got a number of linked parks built. She had a lot of programming, and then she left, and there was a new mayor and so on, and then the whole project went moribund. And then it came back to life again about 25 years later, and there was a Detroit Riverfront Conservancy started, and the energy in that group took it forward to make an unbelievable amount of river walk. And those tensile structures shade a bike rental area, cafe, restrooms, and that kind of thing. But they've really come a long way, and they deserve the award they got. Here's my friend Harriet, who started it all in the recreation department 40 years ago. And that carousel, it was commissioned by they commissioned an artist to do a carousel and have creatures and all sorts of things that were related to the Detroit River and the Detroit. And so it's kind of fun. And that's happening, I think, in a lot of places. They're doing unusual carousels. And you notice the paving has a lot of maps. That's another thing you can do. Here, they were inspired by the Kinty cloth. They have a lot of African Americans in Detroit, obviously. And again, notice the benches, the trash receptacles, the different lighting fixtures, and then flower power is huge. Flats of flowers can make a big difference. This is a wonderful project in, no, I'm having a senior moment here. It's in the Midwest. It's on a river, and it's a very, Green Bay, yeah, the Packers, right, the cheese people. Then this is a very, very small area, and they built this thing, to get the people to be able to reach the river, because very often in these communities, people have never been able to reach a river. And this is, again, very tiny in a way, but wide enough. And that little bump out is great, so people can get off the walkway and get out over the river. And then you can see people can get there and celebrate in large numbers for such a small space. This is Auckland, New Zealand. This is Silo Park as part of a larger installation that's just, it got a top honor. It's built cheek by jowl to tank farms on the waterfront, and it has working waterfront fishing, and it's beautifully executed. And I'm showing this because it's a Silo Park, and they do a lot of programming there. And so on Friday evenings, when the weather's good, a good part of the year, they have movies, and I'll show you later on, projected onto the silo. But people flock down there, and it's not close to the downtown. They flock there because they set up all those temporary little booths for crafts and restaurants, and they do the food truck thing, and it is a hugely successful social event. Plus, they program it a lot all the time. And there you can see there's the food trucks and people just hanging out, enjoying themselves. And that's their children's play area, which, again, I think bringing children into the waterfront, I think is really great. Because if you get the children down there, you're going to get the parents. And besides, it's a happy thing. They're, again, something like a children's market. Notice the whimsical little fish. And that's getting me back to continue on programming. This is Wellfleet, Massachusetts, where they have a whole oyster program with the spats and trying to encourage more oyster production, and they won an award from us. But they have a festival, and I point again, festivals are a wonderful thing to have in your community, and here the fest supports the local economy, and people, they do the contests and they do the eating and they have fun. There they are having fun. And this is a very elaborate festival, but I wanted to just show you, go from shucking oysters to taking on this incredible light production in the city of Baltimore. And it goes on for 2 weeks, 10 days. And they set out a competition on light artists all over the world, and then it's judged. The artists come in and make the installations, and we win, and it's truly magical. I mean, you don't have to do something this big, but you can. A lot of cities are doing these light things, and these were just fantastic to see at night, and they brought droves of people. And Baltimore partly was trying to say, we are not the city everybody thinks we are. And you can. I'm not going to belabor reading all this, but it has huge impact on the city, and it also helped the perception of the city. I'm going to. Oh, and they. Here we are. Here we are in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia for a long time was the city that didn't make their waterfront work at all. Never mind it; they did have 17 lanes of highway that prevented people from really getting down there too much. And but they did finally got a good Waterfront Development Corporation. Finally had bad leadership. And there are bad stories about it, but then they finally got the leadership. And one of the projects that I think they got a private entrepreneur to come do this. This is called Morgan's Pier, and what's great, 5 Lakes Transformation. These designers are so clever, and they just take almost things at hand. You can see those flea market chairs. They take all kind of very simple things and make this beer garden, which is just, it's really fun to go to. You can read the things: hand-painted umbrellas, reclaimed pallet wood planters, traditional linden trees, which are the German beer garden thing, views of the river, custom-built picnic table, industrial spools. It's vintage patio chairs. It's all sort of at hand, flea market. Get down and build it. 5 weeks. And people just, it's a good place to go. This is another park the Development Corporation decided to take a flyer on. It was going to be a one-off event, and this is what this area looked like. It was very dull and boring and just blah. So they hired these wonderful designers to create Spruce Street Harbor Park. And I can't tell you what a spectacular place this is. They, in addition to the upland areas, they took 3 barges and hooked them together So they made this kind of porch, and there's a beer garden over on one side, and then there's all sorts of chairs and pillows and everything you can imagine. And then this floating garden in the middle, and at night it's just magical. I mean, just magic with the lights and the trees. The trees are, and here's the floating garden. And then the gangway to get down, flags that announce, hey, something's going on. And then you can see the little chairs up in the upland. And this is a really, really popular place. And it's so popular that the Development Corporation said, we're not going to have this be a one-off. This is going to be every summer. And so it is. And it's so, what simple thing, Pop-up craft vendors. None of this stuff. And those are LED lights hanging from the trees. And I think they, in fact, have about 57 of these string hammocks hung from the trees. And, people love it, love it, love it. And they have this metal mist trees, too. It gets very hot in Philadelphia. Now I'm going to show you a whole series of stuff that you can augment your waterfront with. These are restrooms that I found in Whangarei in New Zealand. And what I think is amazing, you can see the etching on the roof above of the foliage that's there in New Zealand. Then the restrooms with that elaborate door, and it's open 24 hours a day. There's a tourist center next door where you can go and get the keys to go in here. But restrooms can be so ugly so often, and this one I thought was quite exceptional. There's the great. Now this one we found in Tokyo, and it just has to make you smile. I love finding stuff like this on waterfronts. Restrooms, what did I say? I didn't say, those were restrooms. I'll show you. That's very funny, I think. And this is also in New Zealand by a famous artist, and again, putting tile and stuff like that. A lot of signage. Now, we're big proponents of signage that tell you where you are on the system. Because if you get into a system and you don't know where you are and where you can get out, what good is that? Or, I'm sure you get out, but it's better. And this is I think is a great thing, a postage stamp refuge. This is in Portland, Oregon. You don't often see what's in the water or in the wetland. And so this wonderful interpretive piece tells you about the wildlife, so that even if you don't get a chance to see the little critters, you're told what's there. And here in Cincinnati, in Covington, they have a Hall of Fame of all their famous characters along the Riverwalk, and there's a map of the Riverwalk, and then the Riverwalk within Covington, and then you can see the whole system on the upper right-hand side, and the boulders, and of course lots of excursion boats, but it's a wonderful Hall of Fame. This is in Chattanooga. Here again, notice the furniture. This is the Tennessee. You see the whole system on the upper left, and then where you are right now, and then the logos are important. Okay. He says I'm running out of. I'm trying to cover a lot of ground in a little bit of time. This is in the Quad Cities of Iowa and Illinois, where they've created an enormous amount of walkway and bikeway in those 2 cities, or 4 cities. This is a little park in Davenport where they're interpreting all these special buildings of the area. And so that this is a children's play area, but it also is a celebration of the architecture of Davenport. And they also did this wonderful art piece on one of their islands, which takes, they have to the Grand Jatte, and these wonderful sculptures, which are just fun, and they take them in the wintertime. This is again Auckland. This is very industrial area for a long time, but again, going back to the wonderful cutout and the pictures, again, interpretive signage, historic signage. This was an artist who got even more whimsical, telling stories in beautiful artwork. This is in Minneapolis. I love the little creatures, so while Mom and Dad can look at the history, the little kids can play with the snails. Again, interpreting the beautiful environmental things. This is, again, in Quad Cities. This is in Little Rock, Arkansas, where it's hot. And they instead of spreading the plaques all along, they created kind of like a shade structure with sort of an outdoor museum. Again, back to Davenport and Quad Cities. One of my favorite pieces anywhere, which the indigenous population and interpreting all of those things. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. Then there's a peace garden and a fire circle here. Then Kathy, our friend who runs River Action, is very big on retaining rain and capturing rain in rain barrels. That's a whole subject area of sustainability in the environment that you could take days to talk about. But retaining rain is a fairly simple thing you can do with plantings and so on. And there it is next to a parking lot. Of course, you can also have permeable surface. But that's a whole new thing that's going on all over the country, and something that we all should be getting more and more involved with. Having a sense of humor. I love these guys. These were in Boulder, Colorado, and I came across these and I thought, that's so fun. And then this was in Seoul, and they had what they called a junk sculpture exhibition. So all these creatures were made out of junk, and they were in the river, and people were coming by the droves to see these things. They're really crazy. Again, the edge. This is in Hamilton, Ontario, on the upper side, and again, you're able to get down to the water. The beautiful plantings. On the right is Beaufort. This park actually is gone, now having lost waterfronts. But the plantings here, I think, are so beautiful the way they set back the seating. The paving is oyster tabby shells, so it's not just macadam. All things like that, also carefully taken into consideration. This is in Providence, Rhode Island. I could go on and on about ripping up the highways and daylighting the river, but I want to show this because the architect took a lot of trouble with the ironmongers to tell them to make some really special fencing, some very special light. And again, it's they didn't get this out of a catalog. And this is in New York City. Again, notice this tiny bit of space, but totally different feel to it. There's the fishing areas here for people to go fishing. And this is also in New York. Again, not much space, very elegant. And the piers go out. There's a detailing of the very detailing of the beautiful work. This is in the Platte River in Denver. The Platte River Greenway is one of the first greenways in the country, and here you can see the ability to get down to the water and hang out and just enjoy the sun. This is in Auckland again, the ability to go down the stairs, touch the water. I think that's a theme that's come out in our talks with everybody. This is Dallas, Texas, where they had this great sort of festival area, but again, the ability to sit, walk on the water, and get down and touch it. This is along the Buffalo Bayou there. This is Sausalito on the upper side. This is basically a street end, and again, the ability to get down and touch the water. Also here in Staten Island, you can do this. I mean, unless you have some tremendously dangerous tides. And fishing, I just gave the book Fishing Piers. But fishing is a very important thing about waterfronts. And here you are fishing, although we had a big discussion about the licenses last night. That was interesting. Fish cleaning stations, very good to provide if you've got good fishing piers and good fishing, because people would like to go home with the fish cleaned in their coolers. This one is in Racine, Wisconsin, and this is a very elaborate fish cleaning, bait, tackle, restroom. This Racine Marina is a huge installation and wonderful to learn about. I mean, they've got everything. But this fish clean is a professional restaurant fish cleaning station, which I think was really impressive. I couldn't believe it. So going back to my signage, this is Vancouver, British Columbia. And again, very, I think, really lovely and up above, not necessarily. So there's many, many ways to do signage that can make things sculptural and interesting. Maps on the floor are great, and they happen all over the place. That was Philadelphia. This again is Auckland. No curb and gutter. The paving is very, very pretty, I think, and the way the plantings have been interspersed in there, great. This is in Hull, England. Now, we were there ages ago, And we discovered in the tourist center that you could take this scavenger hunt. You start with the anchovies, and then you go through the alphabet. And they've embedded all these little creatures in the pavings and walkways, and you get a little booklet. And at least you did then. And then you could tick off if you found all the little creatures. And at the end of the day, if you brought your thing back, you got a pin. But see, there's an eel. So it was like that all over this walkway. And I thought, what a cool thing. And, you know, just fun. This is in Philadelphia. This is a fisherman, and he lost his pole, obviously. But again, look at these wonderful fish embedded in the paving, and then they use it as a rubbing. This is a bike rack in Portland, echoing their bridge there. So bike racks can be kind of fun, too. There's another one. Seating can be as varied as you want. That's by the artist Scott Burton. That's in Seattle. Or this is in Washington, D.C. in the Yards project. So there's a big trend now for these sort of loungy things. I think it's, you know, more and more people are lounging rather than sitting. And here's these wonderful ones. And here in San Antonio, entirely different look with the tile and the sort of stone and cement. And here during America's Cup, the beanbag thing. Now that's becoming a little popular. And so you could, at that point, you could watch the America's Cup and hang out with these beanbags. San Francisco, right? San Francisco. But they're amusing to me, and then eating, of course, is always popular. This is in Vancouver. Whoops, Trenton, New Jersey, a totally different look. This is Vancouver, covered. This is a public access way through this restaurant. This is, again, back to, this is actually Wellington. And you see the cafe chairs and tables. You've got a Sunday afternoon entertainers, acrobats entertaining everybody, a little kid's toy house, and again, the beanbags. Now here's a teeny, this is somebody who was asking about, can you have small stuff? And you can. You could just do something as simple as that, which is not very big, and stick it on a pier, and it may fit in very well. And or like we were saying in the car, you know, the people running around ballparks with just those boxes. You don't need a lot of room to sell water or beer or hot dogs or ice cream. And this is in Dublin, where they literally, there's not much space, and they put this little coffee bar there in this very narrow area. And in Paris, they had these sort of, you know, pop-up vending and restaurant and cafe, and they can all be tucked away at night, and there's an excursion boat there. And here on the San Francisco waterfront, sort of a funky doggy diner, but notice the beautiful plantings. And here in Oakland, which is now in its third or fourth iteration of waterfront planning and development, we were there last year or the year before, and they've taken it up many notches. Look at those beautiful flowers, and look at the lampposts with the bikes climbing up. And that's, you know, that's just so whimsical. And they have loads of cafes now, and compared to what it was 40 years ago. And I get back to my petunia power. You know, bunches of flats of petunias, you can say a whole lot. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about children. This was one of my favorite places anywhere. It's in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It is a tiny, tiny space. They commissioned an artist to build this children's play area, which is ship, and it had all sorts of things, bells and whistles and things that opened and closed, and blanks you could get out, but it got old. It was very beloved. For 25 years, people from Halifax adored this facility, but it got old. See how fun. And so they said they had to replace it. So they commissioned, they did a whole bunch of workshops, including a lot of workshops with children. And they commissioned a Boatworks company to create what is now this crazy submarine-y kind of thing. And they also had a decommissioning of the old boat, complete with bagpipers and everything. It was just, it's a wonderful story, and it's teeny. I can't remember the square footage of this tiny park. This is in Santa Monica, California. Again, another very small installation done by the architects in California. The man with the blue jacket on is going to push a button and water will shoot out. And they told us that they wanted the eyes to glow in the dark, but they didn't have the budget. Again, all these splash parks, you know, 25, 30 years ago, they were the new thing. Well, they're not the new thing anymore, but they can be fabulous. So this is in Portland, and this one has sort of programmed. This was just in came to our attention in Tampa, and I had never seen anything quite as silly and fun as this, the big dumping of the bucket. And this is in Chattanooga, where it's almost like they're sorry that they can't really see the river that well. That this has changed since then, but at that time they couldn't see the river, and so the architects just did this so that they would say, we have a river here. Lighting can do so much, and this is in Australia. This is in Santa Monica. These fish in San Antonio, in the new part of the San Antonio Riverwalk, again, just fun, humorous. This fish is in the Port of Los Angeles, and they commissioned an artist because they had a lot of fishing fleet history. And this fish, at the bottom, near the head of the fish, is a lot of recycled and trash that he collected and put down there to sort of, make a reference to that. But it's so elegant and so beautiful. And then this is Chattanooga. Again, there's so many different ways you can do this. And then a fire circle, which they're very hot right now, both publicly and in private homes. And floating cinema, we had a friend who actually did this work. Then again, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Paint white on the wall and you're in business. Or this is the silo in Auckland. And then I'm just going to end up, I know that I don't want to not talk about the role of marketplaces and cultural centers, because I think that's one of the ideas that have been floated for down here. And I said public gathering places for people to enjoy leisure and shopping experiencing, including restaurants, cafes, and bars, a variety of retail opportunities, farmer and seafood markets, arts and crafts, cultural events and exhibitions, push carts, performers, all in a well-designed setting. I'm just going to show 3. I could show many, many more. One of the oldest and one of the most famous is, of course, Faneuil Hall Quincy Market, established in 1976. It is still going strong with, as you can read there, 49 shops, so on, so forth and so on, surrounded by ample public realm with seating, a lot of programming. There it is. This is a very old photograph, so it looks a bit different. The halls don't look that different, but there's a lot more stuff going on around that. And there they are, you can see. Harborside in Sydney, which took inspiration from Baltimore, established in 1988 as part of Darling Harbor, and it's described as a leisure experience. You see, we've gotten away from festival marketplaces. 127 stores, a bowling alley, lifestyle stores, and a 65-foot wide promenade. This walkway, we were there just a couple of years ago. It continues to be a fabulous walkway and has held up amazingly well. And that was one of the signature things about Darling Harbor, is this walkway. And it's the Maritime Museum there on the left. This is what it looks like. It's a huge installation. And that's a hotel behind it. And there's Southgate in Melbourne, established in 1994. Today, 33 bars and restaurants, food court, boutiques, so on and so on, plus a major riverfront promenade, both just on the upper and lower decks. And the stone used there was indigenous to the area, so that I think it's very handsome. It's part of an arts district. It has a lot of public art, excursion boats. I remember, they may not do this now, but they used to have little sound boxes where birds would tweet out. I never had seen that before. So those are just the 3 examples, and you could go on and on and on. But it's all. But think about the design. Think about I'm just going to end up with. This is in Oslo, a pier, a boombox, and a dance. Simple. This is in Hartford, Connecticut. I forget where this one is, but I think that's just wonderful. This is just enjoy the waterfront. That's one of those, anything that floats, races. And then, the ability to touch the water. And with that, I will conclude. The little girl. I was just thinking, it's been 30 years since we were here. There's a whole new generation of people has grown up. I mean, that's just amazing. So you have a whole new generation. This little girl is probably in her 30s. So it's a whole new opportunity, a whole new audience. I just thought about that when I think 30 years, my gosh. So With that, I conclude, and we wish you all the best as you begin to think about this waterfront that's just full of opportunity. And thank you very much for your attention.
Gerald, let me see. I'm going to talk loud, so I can't get one of these microphones. You know, those are some great opportunities, or, great ideas. And again, looking at that picture behind there, there's a canvas ready to be painted. I guess the people today together have seen, some of the things that work. We have, not as many people around here, but we can draw people, and that's what we need to do is figure out what's best for us, for Biloxi, for our coast, to put something, whether it's part of, whether it's this working, whether it's part of the harbor development, and we've got some folks here that have shown interest in every aspect. But again, I said there was more facets to this diamond than really is apparent. But we want to build it, and that's the whole thrust today is to hear what people think, and understand what is the best path to go. And you've seen it 30 years ago, and here we are today. And some of the challenges we have, we just faced a storm, that we've got to take into consideration what works best for us at that spot, at that waterfront. But we've got a tremendous amount of waterfront. If you just look at the boardwalk opportunity, the casino row, the marina, the museum scene that we have. So we need to hammer out together. We've got a lot of folks here that have a lot of ideas, and what works best for us. So with that, Kenny, does anybody have any questions of Ann? And if we need to go back to some of these slides and views, we're here. I think Gerald's going to man the idea board over here, and we'll interact. I know Dick's ready to answer a lot of questions, right?
So if you would, Mayor, if you
Yeah.
pardon me, if you would just raise your hand if you have some ideas you want to share. This is the purpose of this workshop. So let's go ahead and open it up. Raise your hands, share some thoughts and ideas that you might have.
Testing.
Yes, Bobby Carter. One of the improvements I'd like to see about doing is improvement to the marina. The marina we have here, especially the location, is probably one of the best here in the Northern Gulf. The only problem is the marina is not updated, and it needs to be updated. And that's some of my thoughts. I do have some ideas with me, and also I brought Bryce. He's with Bellingham Marine, and they build marinas all over the world. And so I'd like to share some ideas with him.
Right, let me jump in too, Ambassador. That a lot of this conversation got started when the popularity of this billfish tournament, which is world class. Big boats, big prizes, and a lot of attracting of people. And we need a better configuration to service that festival. It's a festival of boats and fishing, and so there isn't just one aspect of this. That's the marina. But we have the green space there. We have an opportunity to walk that waterfront. But what I took away, touch the water. People want to touch the water. That edge is important. We got a little bit of here and a little bit of there, but we need to put it all together. That bridge that was constructed after Katrina, you can see a lot of people on that bridge at one point in time, just walking, because they have to be, what you said, over the water, right? So that's some of the things I think we need to consider as we build this plan. So,
Hi folks, I'm Kim Ross Bush. We talked a little bit yesterday, and some of the things we were talking about down at our meeting was that what really is a deficit here is that people don't have access to the water. I mean, we have beautiful waterfront, and I mean, that's not fair to say you can't go to the beach, but that's not what people typically want to do, sit on the beach anymore. We need gathering places where people can go with their families and can sit for hours and be entertained, and whether that's with food, music, different types of entertainment. And if you look at the point there, if you look at that bridge coming across from Ocean Springs and the gateway to Biloxi, there is so much room for growth there where people could actually enjoy the water. If you think about a weekend down there on the point where you would have food trucks and music and an outdoor environment where people were moving around. Maybe you had some types of exhibits that showed net makers from the past, or paint artists out there who were doing caricatures, music out there. We have always had a dream down at the museum to build a big dancing pavilion, and we were talking about that yesterday, like the Buena Vista used to have, right, Paige? And if you had something like that where you could bring the symphony in, or different types of music a couple of times, maybe once a quarter, you would fill the point up with people down there if you had the facility for people to come and enjoy that outdoor experience. It's money. What we're getting down to is money, but for once in our lifetime, there is a pool of money out there that hopefully we have access to, and some of these things can be put together with the right ideas and the right people working on them, and I think that's sitting in this room. But there are so many things. I made a little list yesterday while we were talking, and a couple of things that popped into my mind. If any of you have ever seen, or I know many of you have seen and heard about the sea organ in Croatia, you know, it could happen here. There's a thing that's happened in Australia where you can go into an environment where they have oyster reefs, and you can stand at a long table and they will scoop up oysters, throw them on the table. You eat oysters right there and drink a glass of wine. That's a crazy experience that a lot of people would love to have. I think waterside music, fresh seafood market, where people could kind of hang out and then go home and take seafood with them. Now, I know all the seafood vendors are going, you know, but those vendors could set up out there and do that type of thing. It doesn't mean you're taking business away from people in your local market. You're offering them another opportunity for business. I just think access to the water. Think about in the old days when we used to have those swim marathons out to the Isle of Capri. You could still do swim marathons in Back Bay, Biloxi, right there at the point. I think people need access to small boat rentals. We have this beautiful pier now at Deer Island. Nobody can get to it. We've got to develop some type of watercraft that can cart people back and forth there. So those are just a few ideas. If you can keep up with me, Gerald, I'm just rattling on. So somebody else jump in.
We're recording you, so we can catch up.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Gordon Jackson with the Biloxi NAACP. Our Economic Development Committee and our Environmental Climate Justice Committee is very active and strong in trying to project ideas for East Biloxi specifically, but for all parts of the city. And I know that the subtitle of this workshop is "And Related Areas." I know that the focus is on the Point Cadet, and that's fantastic. I'm excited about what's going on there. But then as I look at this picture, I see where the coast goes north of the bridge, goes to the northeast part, and then the bay goes over toward the west, and all the way over toward maybe, it's not here on the picture, but potentially it goes west toward where Boomtown and IP are. And I like to think that in terms of related areas, that there's opportunities there too. And that if we put together all the components in that region that is trying to do things together in terms of economic development and environmental concerns, that we can be successful. We could have events like jazz and blues on the bay, or things of that nature, and things. And I'm just conjuring up a lot of different ideas as I go along, and things. But that shows the potential of how that entire area can be a very positive impact for all parts of Biloxi and for that entire region. So I just like to, on terms of and related areas, I just like to keep focus on that as well. Thank you. Anybody else? Next.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, turning my back to you. My name is Milton Segarra from Visit Mississippi Gulf Coast. This is a very special place to live and to visit. Actually, 13.5 million people visited us last year. 79% of those came by cars. So we need to provide some sort of a very important experience, flagship experience to them. What we're trying to do, and we're seeking to bring more experiential travelers to our coast. Those people would like to learn about who we are and what we are, but they want to do it through different experiences. And this type of facility, Mr. Mayor, it's so important that we have it. You know, in Gulfport, we'll have the aquarium, and here, to experience the Gulf Coast, everything starts by the Gulf and ends by the Gulf, by the water. And what the tournament is so important, having that marina ready, have entertainment, food, different experience, that people that come here have a place to go, to stay 1 day, 2 days, 1 hour, but they see something different. People wants to come here. We need to provide this type of worldwide type of facilities so they can spend the time and the money when they come here. Thank you so much.
And I think, Milton, I think an authentic experience is what you want to see what it's all about.
I'm making my way over there, Louis. Thank you, Louis Gametta with Ship Island Excursions. I was glad to see that wonderful photograph of Split. That is a beautiful waterfront. I walked along the Biloxi shoreline this morning at sunrise, and I haven't been there in a while, and I was impressed. I love East Biloxi. That part of East Biloxi is incredible, and I think the potential there to do exactly what they did in Split is definitely a plus for us. And one of the things that I'm interested in is the possibility of expanding our marina out to the east with a new breakwater that might incorporate mooring buoys as opposed to building docks again, because we're so vulnerable to hurricanes here. And a lot of trends all over the country, Caribbean, in this country as well, I saw them recently in San Diego, are mooring buoys. So I'd like the city to consider the possibility of an environmentally friendly breakwater on the east side of the Point Cadet Marina that's jetting out toward Ocean Springs without impacting the oyster reef. I know there's an oyster reef out there, so I think that's a way of bringing transient boaters from all over the country here. And I agree with Bobby, the Point Cadet Marina definitely needs an upgrade. That fishing tournament is incredible, and I'm told by the participants that it's the most wonderful boat fishing tournament in the country right now. So think about that. We need to improve on that. So my end there, I think Deer Island is a beautiful natural harbor. We've got such an asset with Deer Island. I moved from Gulfport. I was in Gulfport for 30 years. I moved back to Biloxi. I live in Point Cadet at the Pelican Cay condos. I never get tired of looking at that beautiful sunrise on Deer Island with that golden glow, especially at sunset. So just think about utilizing Deer Island more as well. Maybe at some point, a natural eco park with nature trails, those exhibits, those interpretive exhibits that you mentioned. But the restrooms are going to be critical for the public. Parking is going to be critical for the public. These are things you have to consider without losing our green space. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Next. You've got your own.
Listen, this is great that everybody's sharing these ideas here today, and I just want to throw one out there too, and no offense to any ethnic group, but Croatia is wonderful, and it is part of our history, and it is part of, the fabric of what we do here, and I love seeing the Sea Organ, but there's another aspect that's natural to Biloxi that we've talked about, a concept, and that's raised boardwalks. Now in Croatia, there's the walls of Dubrovnik. It's a walled city, and we could actually kind of create a raised boardwalk to look like the walls of Dubrovnik, which I've visited also, and there's a couple of buza bars, it's called, in Dubrovnik, and buza means hole in the wall. And you literally walk into a hole, down some stairways, and then you're on the outside of the walls of Dubrovnik and relaxing, having an adult beverage, and watching all the boating and all the activity on the waterfront going on. And they light up, they have LED lights that light up the outside walls of Dubrovnik. But in this concept, you could actually create those raised boardwalks with retail, have a panoramic view that can see the beautiful either back bay or whatever water view it would be. and to let people experience that, both the visitors that we're trying to attract and what an attraction that would be, and our locals that like to entertain and take their families out or their friends along something like that. The other thing it does, it actually mitigates flooding if you built a raised wall and boardwalk. So Mayor, build that wall.
Well, the government was built over several hundred years, and the land tax, the land tax is you buy a brick when it doesn't have the building, and that's how it was built over several years, and that's literally how it was built, the whole city. But we can think about ways to do that. But no, you're right. You look at the point, and Serena and I noticed when we were both in the Republican and split, and this was the village of Biloxi, right? The people that came in from all places, every ethnic group, they lived, they shopped, they made their living in the factories, and it became the village. That point was the village. From Oak Street to the river was the village of Biloxi. Each person, they developed their own parishes and ways to do it. So we're not trying to reconstruct the past, but it really was the point. It really was where you were. And that's the cool thing about what, not trying to reconstruct the past, but it's sinful not to utilize that resource we have that the waterfront presents. Yes.
Appreciate it, Mayor. And I'm actually glad I'm following Councilman Glavin, because that was the point I wanted to make and brag on the city for, because this is a huge opportunity for what we have that we can do with a blank slate to continue the efforts the city is already doing with the connectivity. I mean, you look at the beautiful boardwalk that the city's constructed, and that's huge. That's a huge opportunity, because I do not want us to forget that millennial and working age population. This is a great opportunity to help attract those people. And a lot of these ideas, especially what Ms. Kim was saying too, these are great opportunities that can attract them. I mean, we can talk about food trucks and walkability and access, but these are huge opportunities to help keep that working age population that we so desperately need. Right. So wanted to keep that in mind, and I appreciate y'all and all the discussion.
To jump into that and talk about millennials and Chet said with regard to market studies and another thing, millennials, I think they never eat out. I mean, they have a cook at home, so they always eat out. What's the next wave of things that are going to happen around that waterfront? They're going to visit it, they're going to want to eat, or they're going to want to drink, they're going to want to do those things that they do. So the second wave, you build this, build it and then will come. Then what are they going to do? What's the next wave that's going to develop? Housing, entertainment, other kinds of entertainments. That's going to happen, off of the waterfront, but because of the waterfront.
Jeff Ellis, I'm a board member with the Seafood Industry Museum, and I'm also a past president of the MSU alumni chapter down here on the coast. And I took part in the initial oyster aquaculture meetings that were held here at City Hall, and I think we need to keep focus on our universities as well. We had representation here from Mississippi State and Southern Miss, both who play a critical role in kind of the revitalization of our Gulf, of our seafood industry. And some of the professors from Starkville, they brought some great ideas down with a living shoreline. And I think that's critical. If people could go down there and actually see some of the oyster farming that's happening behind Deer Island, well, let's do that right off the shoreline where our citizens can go see it and our tourists. They talked about pools, building pools down there, because I think the one thing we haven't really talked about a whole lot is the velocity zone that we're talking about building this in. So, I think we have to be wise in how we spend our money down there, knowing that it's a very vulnerable area of the city, probably the most vulnerable area of the city. So we certainly, I know I would be in support of amphitheaters, things like that, but basically something where when the surge comes in and goes back out, you can take a hose down there, clean it up, and get back to business. But yeah, I think keeping Mississippi State and Southern Miss involved is very important. And we can throw Ole Miss in there for Buzzy Bolton.
Next, please. Buzzy.
One of the things that hadn't been brought up yet, in 2017, the city passed the Waterfront Ordinance, which basically laid out an area to be protected where future growth on it by any developer or anything else has to leave an area of the waterfront open for public use. They can build on it with their own boardwalks or anything else, but the idea is for the general public, tourists, and everyone else to have access to the water. That ordinance covers the whole city of Biloxi from the Pops Ferry Bridge all the way to the Biloxi Gulfport city limits. And so there's an area of basically 25 feet that's protected. So any place that the city presently owns or has control of, they can build their own boardwalks or whatever, and then each developer that comes in, we're hoping will follow that same means and build along the waterfront. You can still have your pier, your private piers and stuff, but you have to leave access for the people along the boardfront. We found this in a lot of cities we visited back in 20 years ago. Cities were starting to make the waterfront totally open to the public. With hotels or condominiums built on the waterfront, they had to leave that access. So if you bought a condominium, you would have people walking across your backyard to be able to view the waterfront. And with this ordinance, Biloxi has been left open that way. The mayor is working on a proposal, idea to make a walkable waterfront from the Gulfport city limits all the way to IP Casino. So the areas on the bay that was mentioned a little while ago will also be developed this way. Some of that area is more perfect than anything for your small boat, kayaks, pirogues, anything of that type to use because it's cold water almost year round. On the waterfront, out in the front, it's a little rougher and harder to do. So I think our waterfront will stay open. It's been planned, developed, and laws have been put into effect to protect it. So I think a lot of the things that people are talking about today will be done. As the mayor mentioned, it's going to take time, but it'll all get done. Thank you.
Well, you know, our fuse is lit, and so we want to join in with Buzzy. There are literally 30,000 linear feet of seawall that we have. We've got 14,000 have that 10-foot boardwalk that's on that structure is on top of the seawall. The seawall's been there since 1927, 9 steps in most places. Some of the early projects that we're going to try and investigate, we've got Corps of Engineers approval. A walkable space like that on top of the seawall where you can jump off into the sand. Again, there are bits and pieces from the Bees Road that have 10-foot boardwalks, and then some just at the edge of the seawall. But you know, to bring that walkable surface, and Buzzy was 10 foot, right? Is that what we're looking for? 10 foot with a knee wall that goes up to keep the sand from blowing off the beach. We can't do a lot about the profile of the sand and sea level and all those kinds of things. But there are some improvements that we're in the middle of. We've got Corps of Engineers approval to do those type of things that we want to on top of the seawall to add to that walk the edge. And that's again that is a goal of ours. And I think people the initial project, I think we're going to try to do that between Oak Street and the small craft harbor. That's 3,500 linear feet. And that's on the drawing boards, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy?
I'm Andy Ostelet. I love a good project. The possibilities at that waterfront are absolutely amazing. I went and drove it before I came here today, just so I could have a fresh, in my mind, what I felt like would be fabulous there. Everything that people are talking about, that's what I can see. We need event space. We obviously need event space down there. The Seafood Industry Museum has an amazing space right now. It's a little bit back, which is what we need as far as a covered space. This needs to be an open space that, like they were saying, could wash out, come back in, should we have a storm or something. I love the idea of an amphitheater. I love the idea of being able to access Deer Island. I think that's huge. Because when you drive down there, you look at it, and like you were saying, you can see it, but you can't get to it. And I was thinking, why couldn't we do something to get over there? Well, obviously we have to have boat traffic, but there's got to be some way to get over to Deer Island and utilize that space. Light it up, do something really fun. During the holidays, year round, we should be lighting up everything along this coast, I think. Like one little project I did before. But I do want to see that revisited, and I do want to see all of this come to fruition. I think this is huge. I'm in. I mean, I'm ready to help in any way that I possibly can. And just give me a project.
David Hardy.
Thank you, Vincent. With the Architects Group. First thought in hearing of all these components that could exist on the point are what's lacking, I think, is placemaking. So I think the slideshow was great, shows many great components of great waterfronts, but in terms of placemaking, I think it needs an anchor project. What would that project be to attract people there? One thought Frank and I have been talking about back here is a residential component. Could a residential component exist? The sustainable function of it being, what is sustainable down there? So the idea of building something that could take a bath, having been through it ourselves, we know the challenge of that. My first thought is the sustainable development there would be elevated. So I think some of the concepts that have been thrown out were at elevation 28. So sustainable placemaking that has a residential component, I think could work. Otherwise, you've not created place. And I think there's some fundamental rules of placemaking in terms of places that people feel comfortable in. So if you have a grid that creates pad site development opportunities for private development, I think that would work. Thinking of it in terms of more of a private side development, because I think if we put public money into it, the question is going to be, where's the private side? So private side development somehow has to be incentivized, and without some sort of public investment in the infrastructure that supports it, it I think is in jeopardy of not happening. So.
I'm going to interject a thought right here, David, because I just built back on the point, and I'll tell you what my thoughts about that is that what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I've waited for years to see what would happen on the point, and unfortunately, after Katrina and so much, not much happened, so I went ahead and built a house on Holly Street because I wanted to come back home. And even with the scare we went through Monday, I said for me, the risk was worth the reward for 360 days a year to look out my window and see Deer Island and Highway 90 and the beauty of where I live, as opposed to worrying about 3 or 4 days if it was going to be washed out. Because if the lid comes off, I'm going to hose it out and I'm going to start over. So it is kind of risky. Are people, what do we do first? Do we build the attractions to draw people back down here? Or do you try and bring a private developer in to build stuff hoping he can sell it and people will move here? It's a catch-22. I'm just telling you from somebody who just built a house here, and I have to, and never in my life would I have imagined that everything I wanted to buy, I would have to drive across I-110 and go to D'Iberville. Sorry, had to say it.
And what Kim said, this is more of an opportunity than you think, especially if you can see that picture back there, David, and you can see the walk between Main Street and Center Street. And I envision that block from High Avenue and First Street as a place where things can, this is an opportunity zone. This is yeah, not so much there, but a little bit to the east of First Street. There you go. To the west, excuse me, up there. Between Howard Avenue, right across the street where the old lodge used to be, right there, that block. Not close to, right there, right in there. I mean, if you had a number of opportunities, whether it's condos or apartments or whatever, and then the infrastructure flows as far as the events and the center. Again, opportunities zone, there's an amount of capital gains can be hidden, and there are people ready to go, with those kinds of things. But the residential component is important. You put 300 residents down there, everything pops. Okay. So it's chicken and egg, that sort of thing. But, it has to be concurrent. This is what's going to happen on the waterfront. This is where I'm going to live. I think that's what we're trying to get at, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. We have another speaker.
Paul Gavin, Gulf Regional Planning Commission. Couple comments. One, I like the projects that have the dual purpose, disaster resistance and walkability and access to the waterfront. And two, I wanted to share a little bit of the how. I was involved in another community and their waterfront development. And basically, they waited 10 years for Bass Pro to show up. And after 10 years, they decided, you know what? The water's the attraction. We don't need Bass Pro. And so they just started. They put out a boardwalk, they put out boats, they put out kayaks, they put out a bike rental, they did a water taxi. And slowly the development followed. And every time they heard they couldn't do it, they did. They redug a canal, they put boats in there. It's like Venice. So think about what can be done and what can't be done.
Bobby Carter, you brought a guest with you who talked about the marina and what needs to be done down there, and so we're going to hear from him.
How are y'all doing? My name is Bryce Fisher. I'm an outsider. I'm from Galveston, Texas. But I've been working with Bobby for about a year on the marina aspect of things, and so he asked me to come down and just sit. And as I'm listening to everything, I've made a couple of observations. Number one is access to the water is important, and marinas kind of drive that. In the projects that we build around the world, the marinas a lot of times are the first things that are done, and then development comes around after that. So people want to go down and they want to touch and feel the water, and that has to do with boating, but also accessing through kayaks and paddle boards and things of that nature. And I've heard a lot of people talk about getting to Deer Island. One of the things that the city of Pensacola just did was install a ferry system that goes from Pensacola to Quietwater Beach and also to Fort Pickens, which is on the National Seashore. So they've got a downtown ferry which drives people to the downtown area, and they can get on the boat and they can go around different places. But that would be something to think about, a ferry system that you could go from here to Deer Island, or Deer Island or whatever. A couple of things that I took a look at, where's my notes, as I prepared for this was, we've got a couple projects that we just did in Washington, D.C. One is the yards and the other one is the wharf. A couple big things that I took away from those notes is private-public development, or partnership, drove these developments. It wasn't all public and it wasn't all private. So there's a combo there, and that's got to be worked out. The other thing is retail space, living space, and marina space. Those all kind of go together. So the common denominator in a lot of things that we see is shoreline development, waterfront development. It all goes hand in hand. So there's a way to make that happen. Right now, what I see in this particular area is you have a lot of the infrastructure already there. You've got an attractive point, you've got a marina, you've got facilities right next door, hotels, restaurants, and things like that. So expanding into that green space really is very easy compared to some other cities that are trying to develop it from the ground up, where they're going in and knocking down entire neighborhoods and building all this infrastructure in order to make this happen. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, and if there's any other questions or anything like that, you let me know.
I have a question for you. We haven't really been talking money much, and I think you've done a study about what it would take to upgrade the point of that marina. Can you kind of give us some realistic estimates of that, to modernize it for the billfish tournament and all the other things you just mentioned? Not the land side, just the water side.
Okay, so we did the question is what are the costs involved in rebuilding marinas or building marinas for this type of thing? We provided Bobby with an estimate and the city with an estimate about a year ago, and that was about $16 million to go in and, number one, demo what's there, which is a significant endeavor, and then put in all new floating docks, new electrical, new plumbing, and tie it into the city so that it's resilient. It floats up and goes, goes up and goes down, but it's designed for a certain criteria of hurricane. And we are well versed in doing that. In fact, we're rebuilding the hurricane damaged Katrina Marina in New Orleans right now. That's been a long process for them to get it to where it is right now, but we're going to start delivering docks there in about a month and a half. The other thing that I thought about, and Bobby and I were talking about this morning, is the development along the Gulf Coast going west is becoming more and more involved. So you have New Orleans rebuilding their marina. You've got a bunch of different marinas that are being rebuilt or developed between here and Texas and then down along Texas. So from a boating standpoint, a transient boating standpoint, whether it's cruising boats or tournament-related boats, these people now have a place to go, and they have a jumping off point. So right now, if they come down, there's not a lot of reason for them to continue west, but if Biloxi has a world-class marina, they can stop here, then they can jump off to New Orleans, then they can jump off to places like Lake Charles, or Houston, or Galveston, or Port Aransas, things like that. So there's a lot of development moving west. Just because moving east, it's all maxed out, and people are going to want to find a place to go.
I think part of the parameters that we talked about, we've got, I think, 46 charter boats. Half of them are located in the Small Craft Harbor, half of them here. Some of the things I've seen, especially in Florida, where everybody's, all the charter boats go out one time, they come back, and tourists watch what is offloaded. We reconfigured for about 50 charter boats. Is that right, Buzzy? And then the amphitheater component, where we've created an amphitheater for the billfish tournament. But literally, this will be, located in that green space, so it really is come back and enjoy what fishing has to offer. So
and a lot of people, that's what they want to see. They go to Biloxi or they go to any waterfront community, and they want to see how people interact with the water, whether it's shrimping or oystering or sport fishing or whatever. And so some people just want to go walk the docks and see what came in on the boats that day.
Authentic experience.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Next. You've already spoken, I'm sorry.
Different subject. Just to add something on to the marina question that was just asked. Biloxi has also brought up by somebody a little while ago about expanding the marina to the east. Biloxi also has the potential to expand the marina to the west and take in the area all south of the Grand Hotel, which would almost triple the size of the marina, and also give protection to all the boats in that area. Because one of the problems we have with any kind of dockage, of particularly floating docks outside of the marina, is the amount of chop that we have. But by doing that marina, there could be a lot more dockage and a lot more space for boats to come in here, and we'd get more boats in here permanently.
And now I would like to give his handwriting a break over here and ask Gerald Biloxi to make a few comments.
Well, before I do that, I want to recognize two legislators that have been kind enough to come. Representative Hank Zuber, next to the mayor to his left, and Scott Delano to the mayor's right. No political implications there. And also the Assistant Secretary of State, Ray Carter, is here.
Stand up, bro.
Stand up, bro.
Stand up.
So, and there are many other people that we can and should recognize in the room, but I particularly wanted to just kind of throw out a thought here. I know the legislature just did a wonderful thing this week, very hard work. These guys were in the thick of it all the way to create a vehicle for meaningful transformational projects to be considered for BP Economic Damages Funds. So it's a little ways before it's operational, but it's being set up. And there are other sources of funds, like the Restore Act and Go Mesa, Tidelands. But I think what we're hearing today is what would the people like to see done, and then there's the practical side, as several have been mentioning, and what are costs and so forth. So this really isn't a statement. I really have a question to kind of prompt the audience. I think the legislature rightly, and the Secretary of State correctly, expect to have private investment involved significantly, and I think we've heard a lot of that already. My question to the audience is, how do we do that? What is the magic, and this is for Ann and Dick as well. My own personal thought through the years is that to stimulate public-private partnerships of the kind we're talking about, and there's lots of different places. Placemaking is very important, as David Hardy said. So you've got this huge seascape, like a big canvas, many empty spaces there, not just the Point Cadet site, but the context does matter. But in my own observation and experience, you've got to be doing lots of things at once. Rather than the chicken the egg, you need to be cracking the eggs and raising the chickens all at the same time. You do it a little bit at a time. Some of it is just baby steps, and some of it is sowing the seeds for larger. And And so there's a lot of detail that goes on to a private developer making an investment requires usually a really good feasibility study, really good marketing study. Same for housing or mixed use, or any of those things. So it seems to me like, if you think of a city or any city, and ours is, this wonderful heritage we have, which is so complex, it's really an ecosystem with many, many different parts, many, many living parts. And you've got to nurture all of them and avoid the pollution and the things that kill the living parts. So there's not just one answer to anything. There's lots of pieces. But the biggest piece for us to really get a quantum leap in jobs and tax base expansion to help the state and the county and the whole coast, not just tourism, but across the board. The mayor said, housing in East Biloxi, we've been thinking about it for 13 years. It's, other than Kim Ross and a few others, it's not happening. So how do we make the public-private investment work? What is the incentive needed to get private investors to come say, hey, this is a place we want to be and participate? And I really just kind of challenging y'all to answer that, everybody, including our wonderful consultants here today. I know Scott is a developer himself. Hank, y'all have been in this business a long time. The state has a lot of programs that are not related to the coast that maybe could be tapped in. But there's so many great ideas we've heard this afternoon, and there have been some of them presented before. And there's going to be some process for applying for money, but what is the important way to get people in this opportunity zone to come invest their money in this opportunity zone? So I'm just throwing that out there. Vincent, let me give this back to you. So you
But as a commercial realtor, I mean, it's got to be incentives. I mean, there's got to be tax abatement. I said, as a commercial realtor, I hate to keep jumping up here, but I mean, there's got to be tax incentives, abatement programs, and things that encourage investors to come to this market as opposed to a Gulf Shores or someplace else. And about the only thing that's going to do is that there's some incentive for them to save money and choose this market over another market. And that means that we offer them something they can't get somewhere else. Anybody else?
I was hoping I was going to come to you next anyway.
I'm Chad with Golden Nugget, Chad Harrison. One thing that Kim just brought up about investment is our owner in Galveston owns the Pleasure Pier, and he also owns the convention center that he built with private funds backed by the hot tax in that area. We own a significant amount of property, or he does, just north of the bridge that ties into Point Cadet, and our interest lies within what's behind the seawall or what's behind what's built on the waterfront, and that's Point Cadet or that piece over there. And I've been a long proponent, Mayor's heard me say multiple times, as Gerald, I said yes, told Gerald yesterday, is a convention center on this end of the city. We have a beautiful convention center that is done very well, but being on the Tourism Commission, and Milton's here, and he can probably confirm as well that people select where they go for meeting space based on how many hotel rooms are within 1 mile of the facility. Unfortunately, after 2005, we lost a significant number of hotel rooms that were around that area. So we, or me in particular, that space behind there, we're talking about how to energize it, how to support it, how to put people on it. Well, we've got to get the people here first. So one of the issues, I think any hotelier on the coast will tell you, and I'm sure Kenny and them confirm, we don't need any help on the weekend. We're full. And I think most hotels, especially casino hotels, are full. Where the assistance is needed almost year-round is weekday. And it's an opportunity to elevate the hotel room rates, to occupy the rooms by being able to go after the bigger conventions, meetings, associations, without having to provide a subsidy. And right now what happens, and I assume Milton is still happening, is when these people come to us and they have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people, you have to provide a subsidy to bus them. Well, no one wants to be bused in the first place. You want to come out of your meeting and be close by to where your hotel room is. So you're at a disadvantage already before offering. I've seen subsidies go up to $25,000 for transportation back and forth to the hotel rooms. So for that space, to me, and I don't know the logistics of load in, load out, because it does have to be elevated, but to energize it, to energize the waterfront, to attract the private investment for restaurants, needs to be something on the space or nearby that can be used hopefully year-round, not just a summer piece. Now, also, we own, or our owner owns Pleasure Pier at Galveston Island as well. Now, I know there's another hotelier in that area that's talking about something similar, so obviously wouldn't want to build two of those, but those are, again, things I think what's most important. Yes, having a beautiful waterfront, but how do we get people from out of town to spending the incremental dollars in our area down there? And either it's that amusement piece, and it's a well-done amusement piece of anyone who's been to Pleasure Pier. I've not, but I've seen pictures of it. But it is an attraction that draws very well, and the meeting space. But to me, the meeting space for this area, and I don't care if it's in front of Beau Rivage or Hard Rock or wherever, I hope their hotel's full every night, so I get to lower my hotel rate for you guys. I have lower rates. But that's great that that we can fill up, but to me, one of the most important things we can look at in that area, or I know I've talked with Tillman about private partnership. There's he's willing to be a participant as a developer if there's government funds available for that area, whether it's through a hotel tax or something else, and I'm sure he remains with that thought process. But convention space, anywhere from that point all the way down, beautiful waterfront, I think would be tremendous.
Let me jump in. I hadn't done a lot.
Gerald, was that enough? Okay.
I hadn't done a lot of numbers, but if you take a 1 mile radius from, say, Highway Street and Highway Avenue, there are about 5,400 hotel rooms within that's a mile radius. So you cover a lot of ground. Milton and I had some conversations about what's possible, what's doable. But one thing I want to note, again, from the casino part of the ball game, what they bring to the table. In December, I met with the Southeastern Tourism Society, and they came over, from all over the Southeast, and they could not believe that they could get a $79, $89 midweek room rate, as opposed to $149 in Charleston for their little conference. And that's a direct, result of the inventory, the excess inventory that you have in midweek. So we talked, Milton, about, we need to pitch that in every way. So everybody wins, and again, the attraction, the facility, and where, there's some excitement about what you can do while you're there, I think adds to the possibilities. I've seen Tillman's Convention Center in Galveston and the Pleasure Pier, and he certainly has some thoughts, and we're open to what works for Biloxi, but that's again part of the components, part of the facets of everything we have as far as this diamond, that we're trying to polish up.
Thank you, Mayor. We've heard from the Golden Nugget, one of the stakeholders down on Point Cadet, and now we're going to hear from Kono Parana of Margaritaville, Biloxi.
I thought Kevin talked for us already, so I don't want to say the same thing that everybody's already said, but Chet kind of nailed it. We need to fill them during the week. Convention Center is definitely something that's going to bring that new demographic into the downtown area, that's going to bring the people that want to get out, walk around, be close enough to be able to walk around. With what we're trying to expand right now, is going to bring in more of the family market to the point, and they need other things to do as well. So I grew up on the water. We all grew up on the water. It's something that we've all done, and I don't think anybody really does it anymore. So I think bring in anything that helps us bring our families back out and have an experience other than a quote-unquote retail experience where I'm paying to go do something with everybody. You know, it betters the community as a whole. But anything that we can do that, like he said, was conventions. We get phone calls all the time, all these RFPs of people that want to bring in their groups, and we lose out because we're not close enough to where they want to be. So it's something that we really need to look at.
Anybody else? And Mayor, just so you'll know, that cell phone you keep hearing ringing over here, right over there. Right over there.
Let me just tag along what Chet was saying. In the convention world all over, one factor is so important as walkability. Meeting planners, association executives, they are taking their business to downtowns, that they can walk from the hotel, maybe 2 or 3 blocks to the convention center. The money they want to spend in transportation, they want to take it for going to venues, different activities. So, and I'm being part of the Coliseum Commission as an ex officio member. I know how hard work they're putting to try to develop a hotel over there. And there was we failed in one time, there's another developer that is looking at. But the key question will be how fast it's possible to develop this versus to develop a complete district that will have and house 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 rooms. So that's a question for us as a destination. And what Chet is saying, having the critical mass of rooms here, it's something that we should pay close attention to this. It's very important, and the convention business, to the target that we have, associations, some corporations, some other groups, will be a perfect fit for the Sunday to Thursday type of pattern that we could bring them here. So that's food for thought that we should be considering.
Milton, wait, just wait for one more second. I got a follow-up, and I want you to kind of comment on it. You know, our neighbors, our neighboring states, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, Louisiana, and others, outspend us in marketing. We don't have the marketing dollars that are generated to compete with them on our message that we're trying to send out there. And I'm going to throw this out there. We do not have a restaurant tax. Talked about it for decades. I've been in this business for 30 years plus, and we've talked about it until we're blue in the face. It's another avenue that our tourists use, just a 2% tax on restaurants, not your grocery stores. I'm talking about restaurants. Was that a source, or is that something you would be an advocate of, or do you have any other thoughts and ideas on how we can increase our marketing dollars to get the message out so that we can attract more visitors to the Mississippi Gulf Coast?
Well, the fact of the matter, Kenny, is that if you take a look to the actual net dollars that some of our key competitors are putting in the market, we're way below them. That's a fact. And in order to increase the visibility of the destination, to all of us, it's important to increase that revenue. That's a possibility. There are some other models available in the States, like a Tourism Improvement District, TIDs, that are specific private funds that are created between the organization and certain members of a region. So yes, to answer the question, yes, that will be phenomenal to happen, and a very specific focus and goals to invest that money and have a return on investment that will generate more visitors, more tax. It's going to pay back with the money that is going to come to the government and local governments, and I think that's something we should pay attention to as well.
And I just want to make one other comment. Hotels currently have a 5%, in addition to the 7% sales tax, there's a 5% tax on top of it for hotel rooms. So visitors pay 12% tax when they stay in a hotel room on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Thank you.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I did not call on our two legislators that are here at least to say hello. And we have Representative Hank Zuber. We heard from Andy Osler from Gulfport earlier, so let's go to Ocean Springs. Hank Zuber, and next will be Representative Scott Delano.
Well, thank you, Vincent. Mr. Mayor, City of Biloxi, thank you for the invitation. I just want to make 2 points before I leave. Number one, connectivity. That's been mentioned several times. That is a key. You know, we don't have the population density that some of these other cities have. So we got 350,000 population in South Mississippi. So you must have connectivity. Number two, and lastly, Mayor Blessey was absolutely correct. A large component for the BP projects will be the private-public relationships. So that cannot be stressed enough. I think, Mr. Mayor, you should be applauded for having this meeting. It's been very good, a lot of good ideas. I represent Ocean Springs, so anything that I can do to help, I'm here. And we're talking about connectivity. The bridge between Ocean Springs and Biloxi, like the mayor mentioned, you have 100 people approximately per day that walk that bridge. So thank you for having me.
Council President, Mayor, thank you. Everyone who's in this room is interested in what's going on here on the point. I come to this not only as a legislator representing Biloxi in the honor of representing Biloxi, but also as a private developer who has some experience in developing larger projects like this, of what we're talking about here today. So I'm trying to drill this down a little bit more. I know this is a public comment section or a public period for us to explain or to answers or just provide input onto what we, or as to what we would like to see in this area. But I would like to ask us to really kind of focus on let's define more of the scope of work for this area, exactly what we're talking about. Are we talking about obviously the Marina area that is south of the existing bulkhead? Then we've got the south side of Highway 90, which is the green space area that we see now, that's immediately to the east of the Golden Nugget property. And then what is the area on the north side of Highway 90 that we're going to include in this scope of work? I think that once we do that, then we can really kind of start laying down what are the constraints that we have to look at for a development of this type. That's going to be primarily your existing development that's to the west. Obviously the limitations that the water will provide to the east and Highway 90 has to the north for the traffic flow. We also have environmental concerns that we'll have to be mindful of and cognizant of as we move forward with the types of development and the intensity of use that we'll have in the area. And then traffic flow, whether that's pedestrian or by automobile, is going to be critical for the types of development that we're going to be able to see down here. That also feeds into the hazard mitigation and the resiliency that's been discussed in here before, and how will that be a constraint on the type of development. And then the next thing that we're really going to be, I think what we're trying to talk about here today is how do we present a vision that projects the character of Biloxi in the most appropriate way. That's going to be the types of uses that we want as a part of the scope of work, whether it's going to be a retail, an open air area, green space area, the intensity of development, the density of the use of residential or versus commercial, food service, and the such. And then fourth, and probably the most important for me in my role as a legislator, is understanding the structure of development. How will we structure the ownership of this area? Is it a single master development, or is it going to be broken up into multiple developers that come in and take pieces and components of this? I think there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about. The legislature has used, and the coast delegation has committed as an effort to show our commitment to the city of Biloxi's efforts to redevelop the Point Cadet area up to $350,000 in FY19. And that money was really intended to be used as a match for private investment that comes in. We want to have a carrot, and we're willing to commit a carrot for a private developer to come in and show, or once they're able to demonstrate that they're willing to commit their money to this project, that the state is willing to look at using some of our Tidelands funds to help offset some of the additional costs that are going to be incurred for the development of this very critical piece. We want to say in how that's going to be done, and we want to be a partner in that. But as was stated earlier, this has got to be something that's going to be driven by the private sector and private sector dollars. So, Mayor, Council, please, let's move forward and let's figure out how we can make this work and to bring that private investment in for our Gulf Coast.
Thank you, Scott. And again, part of the ball game is to define a path. Okay, I know a number of studies have been, $100,000 studies, most recently with regard to, I think, the Tradition project that really defined impact without question. If this is built, once we decide the scope, and whether it's multiple or a master situation, and a definition of how much residential, how much food and beverage, how much marina. There are bits and pieces, but I think we need to collectively define what are the parameters that if this answer is yes, it's a go for whatever the private can provide and whatever the public can provide, with given the opportunities we have. So anyway, that's the situation. I think the next step of that $350,000 commitment, which we used a little bit to define this workshop, as a matter of fact, and then what's the next step is what are the real metrics that the impact of this collective set of ideas will bring to the table, and how will that impact not only Biloxi, the coast, but the state too. Yeah, Vincent.
I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and call upon the Deputy Secretary of State, Raymond Carter.
On behalf of the Secretary, first, thank you for the invitation to come down and witness what is going on, and I look forward to getting with Delbert and telling him what was presented here today, and how this workshop has shown or presented ideas on how we might be able to use this jointly held state and city property. Thank you.
Well said. Anybody else? Okay, Mayor, Council President, turn it back over to you.
Yes, I'd like to hear from our experts. Y'all have listened almost 2 hours of ideas and exchange of some things. Do y'all have any closing comments? You got to have some. So if you're calling on, you got to have some. So
No, we're going to talk tomorrow, but the whole thing takes a long time, and it can be incremental. As I think Gerald said, you don't have to do this all in one big swoop, and you can be bits and pieces. And you didn't talk a lot about, you can tell we are big advocates for the public realm and the public access, and those pieces can take place in little bits and chunks as part of an overall scheme, and as the money comes along, or as somebody comes along and says, I'm willing to do it. But this whole enterprise takes years and years and years. I mean, even people that have tons of money and all that, it can take 10, 20, 25, even 50 years from writing it on a napkin to cutting the ribbon, and then you're going to cut the ribbon again in 25, because as I said, Oakland is in the 4th generation, so it's a long-term proposition. And you have a lot of territory. And I want to mention, you have beautiful trees. Don't overlook your trees. Oh my goodness, we couldn't get over it riding around Biloxi to see those magnificent trees.
I don't know what the future holds, but some of the chances we took together with the city and the county, we built a $1.6 million boardwalk behind Restaurant Row without any real purpose other than no gut feel it was the right thing to do. Now, the next step, another gut feel, and probably another $1 million that will take it to the west towards Treasure Bay and possibly a boat launch capacity, boat launch facility there. But just in the back of my mind, right there, the natural point of what's going to, is the center of gravity, so to speak, what kind of opportunity will be right there at the foot of the beach and Veterans, as far as a coffee shop. When we walk it, you need to take a break, go to the restroom, go to have a cup of coffee or a beer, whatever, right there off the boardwalk, or visit a food truck that might be parked there. And just to see over the next cycle what happens there as a metric of what could be if we did all these other things. So that's in the back of my mind. See nobody's really approached me yet or approached us yet, but it's just going to be interesting to see. I know before we were open, people were jogging and strolling and so forth on it. So the interest is there, and almost like the Biloxi Bay Bridge, I know people will have it, and what's the next step? It'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Buzzy, you got something else?
Third time, by the way.
Yeah, this is it. You got three shots at it.
Fofo just brought it up, and I'd like to invite everybody to come down and take a walk on the West Biloxi Boardwalk. Phase 1 has now been opened. The construction is all complete. The county is now getting ready to take over with its reestablishing what Mother Nature took away in Nate and trying to get all of the growth back so we can have a ribbon cutting and a grand opening for it. But come down and take it. My recommendation is to do it right at sunset because it's real nice to, 1, to see the sunset, and 2, be on the walkway when all the lights kick on. Come down and enjoy it. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Bill Mitchell for the engineering we did down there and all the things that we've done together with regard to the possibilities of boardwalks, period. So very ingenious, or whichever the term is, things that were done. So you did the engineering profession well. Appreciate it.
Mr. Rigby, you have a comment?
I think it's less important to hear from us than for us to hear from you. And this has been a good session that stimulated by Ann's slides. I'm sure that got people thinking. And it's very encouraging to us that you are doing this, talking to each other and sharing ideas, and there's some discord, I sense, but that's okay, that happens. Work it through. So this is a beginning, maybe the third beginning, but it's a beginning in 2018, and we're going to talk tomorrow about a follow-up step that could be exciting, namely a conference.
Thank you again. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this meeting and again, participating and moving this along. Before we recess, I also want to recognize the godfather of the council, Councilman George Lawrence. He had some commitments earlier today, but I'm sure he'll try to make it tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We'll go ahead and recess until tomorrow at 10 o'clock and continue the process. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, Scott. Thank you, man.
You didn't have nothing to say, brother. That's good. It's probably better